Okay, I think we're live. Double checking. Yes. All right, we're live. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Stellar Podcast. I do not know what episode this is, so I'm not even going to throw out a number.
It's got to be
Tyler might know.
26, isn't it?
26, 27, all the same here. Joined by Tyler, as always. But this week we have a special guest, and he's the infamous, the mysterious, the legend himself, StellarZac. Stellar's. I almost called you Stellar as if Stellar is your first name, which we will talk about later. But Zach, what's up?
Hey everybody, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk.
We're very excited to talk to you and hear from you as well, because as you said, you're legendary, and we paid a lot of money for this. Wait, what?
We did pay a lot of money for this. The fee to get him here, guys. So now you'll never understand.
You have no idea.
All right. Well, I guess before we dive into what you've been up to, let's kind of like reel it all the way back. Like, how did you get into this space? What were you doing before this? And then how did you kind of end up at SDF?
Yeah, for sure. So I want to preface this is you can turn off the fake me. I'm here. I'm a real person.
Okay.
It's not somebody.
Let me turn it off and hopefully nothing breaks.
Yeah.
There he is.
Hey,
Hi, how's it going? Yeah, so I got into this stuff a while back. I originally got into distributed systems through distributed and decentralized social networking. A long time ago, there was a network called StatusNet that was like federated social posting, and that turned into things like GNU Social and Diaspora. And people may know it more now as Mastodon Social and Pleroma and things like that. And spent a lot of time there talking to people. I have a design and marketing background, and so those were pretty heavily dev-focused people on those networks because it was niche networks. It wasn't like Twitter, and with the dev communities and with like especially a distributed open source communities, there's a lot of overlap into cryptocurrency and blockchain stuff. And so they started to teach me a little bit more about how this stuff works. And after a few months and a few years, started working on personal crypto projects and writing about blockchain tech and other things like that. And yeah, in 2017, everybody says in 2017 because was a big year for people to get interested. In 2017, it came to a head, and I wasn't necessarily looking for a job in blockchain, but I've been writing about it and was kind of found and ended up at Stellar. Also, before I ended up at SDF, Stellar Development Foundation, I got involved somewhat around the ecosystem, playing in some of the SBC projects, and I discovered Color Glyph, which was Tyler's project, and that was towards the end of 2017. So I spent a significant portion of time making a lot of art on Color Glyph because it was fun, and that's how I met Tyler before I started at SDF.
Wow, you guys go way back. It's
like way back.
Way back to 2017 that year.
Well, that feels like forever ago. Like when people talk about 2017 in this space, it feels like you're talking about like a decade ago or something crazy, but really it was just like 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And 2020 has been the longest year ever. So,
I mean, basically when I started, it was in a community role, community facing. I'm sure everyone knows that. I spent a lot of time getting to know the community that was still around in the beginning of 2018. And trying to find ways to improve how we engage with them, like as an organization, SDF particularly. There were a lot of gaps there, particularly in like day-to-day conversation. We had some transparency things, which I think we've done some pretty good work on improving as far as like mandate and balances and stuff like that. But just like general things were difficult to get answered or feel like there was somebody there to represent them. And so when I started at SDF, we were relatively small organization still. We had a small handful of people, mostly developers, and they were so heads down that their ability to come and interact with the community wasn't as much as you'd see from other things. So big push was to get people in that could help do dev support, as well as start trying to bring new use cases or listen to use cases that people in the community have put out there and at least try to explore them and other things. Obviously, you guys on the ecosystem team are now carrying forth that torch, and both teams we were kind of combined and now we've split. But it's been really interesting and really cool to see how much more there is as far as like tools and content and
Yes.
stuff than there was at the time back in beginning of 2018
Yeah,
when I
well,
started.
I don't even think what people realize, like even when I got hired, SDF was way, way smaller than it is now. And speaking of, Zach is the one who actually hired me, so you could thank him for being stuck with me and then ultimately stuck with Tyler, so it's his fault. But anyways, like not only were you doing kind of community stuff, but you had your hand in a lot of other things all at once because there wasn't enough people to do everything.
Yeah.
Which has changed a lot lately.
Yeah, so I mean that was another big thing. 2017 was interesting, I think, for a lot of projects out there and organizations and people developing in blockchain space. There were so many people that were interested in building, but there wasn't a lot of people out there that could or would wanted to talk about like what those building things, like what they're building or how they're building, or what does that mean. And so what you'd see was a lot of people and forward facing roles like marketing or growth or whatever, they would end up at a lot of different orgs trying to help out and give a hand where they could. But like, yeah, it was just part of like bootstrapping things. And when I started at SDF, you know, even though I came in as the community role, since it was a small team, like just keeping the lights on and making sure that we were still talking to our like general audience, like through social media and on newsletters and stuff like that. Like that stuff still had to go out. So that was still part of the day to day. Another part was like gauging what are people talking about Stellar, and what can we learn from that, and how can we improve the technology later on, and just like putting that together in a way that SDF could, like people working on stuff at SDF could parse, you know, like in a day to day. So I think it's been really interesting to kind of see how that stuff is turned around. I mean, yeah, we have grown significantly. I think in November last year, you see a pretty significant shift. I think we talked about it in some of the reports. We've gone from, this year alone, like 50 something people on the team to about 70 something people. But last year we went from, I think, like small 20 something people, 25, to like the 50 that we started the year with. And that's been really, really helpful in trying to like do a lot of things across the board. For marketing, it's been great because now, you know, ecosystem is focused on building the community and trying to get engagement from developers outside of Stellar and engage developers that are here. And we can focus on the business to business stuff and support to help the partnerships team, the BD team, get some like companies interested, and also help you guys get people in for the stuff you're working on. So it's kind of like a twofold thing. So we actually have multiple people on this team now, and it's been really, really cool. A lot of behind the scenes stuff, but all that stuff should play out, you know, before too long.
Yeah.
Backing up just a little bit, I have a couple of questions around particularly the transition, because a lot of your experience comes from like community engagement around particular topics, in this case like blockchain or decentralized communication networks. I'd be kind of curious, because a lot of my experience from blockchain comes from a technical perspective, so like building things and using the technology. But a lot of your interest revolves around the communities that are building up around those. And I'd be curious kind of your perspective on just your thoughts around how does that happen? How do you build a healthy community around something that tends to be very technical, and in this case also monetary? So as you're talking about community development, how do you approach kind of building that, and also the process by which that grows and changes, right? Because now you're in a more of a marketing role in the B2B arena, but that's not where it started. So kind of as you think about community development, what are some of the things, like, because you managed the SBC for a long time, you were heavily involved in the funding mechanics that kind of I'm overseeing now. But as you look at kind of what's a priority, particularly in a young network, just kind of your thoughts around community development.
Well, I mean, I feel like this is kind of a softball, since you were part of this process from the other side. But like one of the big things, and we hear it a lot, right? Like you can't do anything on a network that you don't know exists. And if you do hear about something, what is the availability of like educational pieces or tutorials or like people that can engage with you on that stuff? There's a lot of people like other networks, for example, had a heavy push early on to do like developer focused like thing. Everything was dev workshop, dev workshop, dev workshop. So as those networks grow, that stuff came to a head, and there were a ton of people who already knew it and had tutorials and expanded. But that works the other way around. SDF was really focused on the business side of things, like finding organizations that wanted to use the network to move money across borders. And so there was a lot of content about that out there from that perspective, but there wasn't as much like stuff that you guys are putting out right now. So like surface level, just introductory stuff. I want to start hacking around and doing this sort of thing. But on the same page, devs aren't the only people that can help grow the network. There's a ton of people in the community that have great ideas or want to support or like want to like help any way that they can, but they need the tools to do so. And the first major step for that is listening, because when I came in, there was a lot. I mean, and it's warranted. There's been a lot of conversation back when it was on the old Slack, back when we moved to Keybase, about things that people have that they felt weren't being heard. So whether it was like GitHub issues or whether it was something as simple as like moderation on like one of our channels, like just being able to be there and have these conversations with people and hear what they're thinking, and take it back, like have takeaways that we can implement like further down the road or like into a roadmap to see what can we create or what can we make to empower people who want to talk about Stellar or be involved. I think what I've really enjoyed seeing happen a ton, or people who've come in and they have a surface level understanding of the network, and they have warranted criticisms, but as they've been in the community longer and longer, they have really like grown their own knowledge through both the content that they're producing, but also through the support of people like Kolten or yourself, Tyler, or like as that's come along. But yeah, we didn't have a lot of that early on, and especially when I started. And so spent a good amount of time just trying to listen to people. And crypto communities are interesting because they come and go. You'll always have your core community members, and they're awesome, and I love them to death, and they're amazing. But like the hype aspect isn't always there. So one of the big things that's important to do is, when in these waves, these cycles that happen of people entering the community to learn, you need to make sure that you have some way to retain this past just that hype point. So if you come in and you end up on a page that's like, here's the 20 things you need to know about Stellar, get started, but it directs you to old like bulletin boards that don't work, or it directs you to something and no one's answering any questions anywhere, then those people probably won't be retained to come back like or build later on. It's not necessarily about, okay, well, you have to hook somebody the first time they enter the community, and then if they don't stay for the first 30 days they're there, they'll never be back, because people will come and go and return. You just want to make sure that you've set up, you have like a clear path forward for like where do you engage, where's the best places to engage, and if you want to get started building something or you want to participate in a project, where can that go? So when I started at SDF, there were like 30 different channels to talk about Stellar across the board. And personally, I'm a huge proponent of like community run, open source kind of style like places. So I want to support those where they are. But like SDF alone had like multiple like things that we were using, and it was just confusing. Like, where are we directing people? Is it to a Telegram? Is it to a Discord? Is it to the Reddit? Is it to whatever? So, one of the things that we've tried to do through 2018 was try to cull those channels down to where it was easier to start participating. So yeah. Don't know if that was a long-winded. I forgot even what your question was.
Me too, but
no, that's very good.
One thing I was going to add on to that. Hold on.
You can't ask questions.
One thing I was going to add on to that, it's like, speaking of having documentation that links to old stuff, like one of the most satisfying things ever, and I'm sure Tyler agrees with this, is like when somebody comes back from like 2017 or 2018 or whatever for the first time in a long time, and they're like, whoa, like there's a lot that's different right now. And we get that every once in a while, and that's like one of the most satisfying feelings, because it's, you kind of get lost in everything that happens in the day to day, and you forget about progress over time. But when people come in and say stuff like that, it's really kind of relieving, because you know, like everything you've done is kind of like working out and paying off. But anyways, go ahead, Tyler.
Yeah, I think to me it's speaking to the design of a community, that it's not like trying to take it over or brute force the way that you want to see something run, but really just designing a space and making sure that space works well, like an architect building a building, making sure that it's designed well for whatever the occupants are going to be. And in the same way, when you're designing a community, saying who's going to be here, and making sure that the space is created so that they can succeed, whatever that goal might be, rather than trying to brute force the one specific way that I might want to see work done. Like I hate email, for example, but tons and tons of people love it. So you can't exclude that kind of a channel if a ton of people like to use that. Yeah, so you're really starting to take the view of what's the ecosystem doing and what's going to work best for the ecosystem, and building up a platform that works well for that kind of communication.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think another thing is like, you have to kind of go where the community is going as well. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, even though we currently have like a Keybase and we had a Slack and whatever, you know, there's like other places that are around and exist that if the community uses these platforms, we should go there if they prefer them. In some cases we can't. Like I know everybody wants us to get on Telegram, and you know, likelihood of that happening is probably pretty low. But like Galactic Talks is a good example, because it was kind of a niche place when, you know, we would use for SBC, but I really think it's a really cool platform for people to go and talk about what they're building with people that aren't run by like SDF, isn't necessarily moderated by SDF. I don't think we have to be a check and balance for every single conversation about Stellar. And I like seeing communities kind of decentralized in that way, because out of those little units, I mean, I'd point to like Public Node or Stellar Global, which is what Sam's doing, Stellar Global, and then Public Node with Daniel. Like these are like different kind of efforts, and there's some overlap there, but like they run their own programs, and they run their own like communities, and you know, we talk to them and they talk to us, but it's a pretty, you know, individual run effort in a lot of ways, and they've done a lot of really awesome work, and they need to have the ability to do that and not feel like they're being stepped on by SDF at the same time. So I think that's an important thing to mention.
Yeah, those are like some of the coolest things that have popped up, because for a while, especially when I think back to when I first got hired, there wasn't a ton of content coming out of SDF, and then we kind of evolved and, you know, started really focusing on outward facing content. And then now there was definitely no community content, at least not a lot of it at that point. Like there wasn't community podcasts or anything like that. But now we have community podcasts. We have a lot of people who are active on Twitter. We have people running their own community groups. And that stuff that wasn't really popular, not when I first got brought on, just because of the stuff you're talking about earlier, where you have these sort of waves of hype where people come in and they do a bunch of cool stuff and then they leave, and then you kind of have your core community kind of left behind. And so now it's been cool to see like that core community focus on doubling down on their efforts and like doing a bunch of really cool stuff.
Well, yeah, and I think that what's also cool about our community, or like the core community, is that if you watch how a lot of people interact or projects interact and stuff like that, there's always some competition there, or some language or escalation or toxicity or whatever you want to call it. And I think that, you know, you're going to get that at times regardless in any community. And there's a couple of different ways to deal with it, and there's ways to handle it that make more sense. But if your general presence out there isn't like, okay, SDF's a negative group, but it's instead people that want to be helpful, like not SDF, but sorry, the Stellar community. Those resources that are provided can be tools that they can leverage in their efforts. So it's examples across the board of people on Twitter, you know, like they'll try to start fights with some of these like external community people, and they don't bite, right? Like, I know, I'll call Sam again. He'll drop a link to some document or some resource, and you know, or Picking Unicorns or anybody, like they'll just try to share the educational aspects. And I think, you know, SDF as an organization, we should also foster that sort of relationship with our community. Like, okay, well, if you have an issue with us, we should respond the same way where we can about like, hey, here's a resource that may help. I think one of the big things that we're working to do and we can talk about marketing stuff in a little bit, is like just show people the work that we've already have available, like what tools are available, how Stellar works, and where they can go to like grow that knowledge. And so I think a lot of it's been done now. That wasn't there, like as you mentioned, but I think it's big effort to show people the outcome of that.
If we keep plugging Sam, I'm gonna have to send him an invoice for all of these ads.
I mean, there's a lot of people I've met over the years, like really, really great people from when I first started. I don't want to name everybody because I don't want people to feel like I've missed out. But like I remember every single person I think I've talked to from like in the Stellar community and the impact that they've had. I mean, people from the old subreddits like B1TCC or Lilynut or like all these like 2017 community veterans, like they're really great people and they have a lot to share, even if they're not around so much, but they've really made an impression, I think, and impact how the community has come. So
yeah, I remember from way back doing SBC challenges, and kind of feeling that there was a pretty big divide between SDF, the organization, and the community that was forming around that. It was kind of SDF was out there doing their own thing, and then the community was kind of left to pick up pieces and just kind of do whatever they wanted. But then noting a pretty fundamental shift after you got hired and then in the subsequent months, as more and more that dividing line started to get blurred and more SDF members were kind of becoming part of the community and more community members were being involved with things that were happening directly at SDF. And that line has only continued to blur and merge really as people like Kolten and myself jump on and we start efforts like the big SCF update, where rather than kind of where I feel like I had felt like SDF would include people into their inner circles. It's much more the community kind of pulling in SDF and SDF kind of coming from the inside out. So we're all the community and SDF is just inside the community. And the members of SDF are really just working for the community's good and really seeing it more as the Stellar universe and an SDF working from within that. And that doesn't just happen. That happens because you design for it. And then you take all of the long, slow, hard efforts to actually make sure that happens. And it's loads and loads of conversation and carefully written blog posts and announcements and tutorials that really help people onboard so that the community that you eventually create is this more cohesive unit where there isn't such a large separation. That's so important if you're building a decentralized organization. Because you're not decentralized if you have that pretty significant divide. And to see that becoming more blurred over the past few years has been incredible. And really, I do attribute that to your efforts once you were onboarded into SDF and making efforts to see that happen. It's been incredible. Like even just myself competing in SBCs and then through the SCF that you had designed, to see those fundamental shifts happening, but through very specific efforts and articles and programs that came out to really, it wasn't accidental that happened. It was very intentional. And it's amazing to see because I think we have a much stronger community and a much better protocol ultimately at the end of the day because of those efforts.
Yeah. And I think, it's also about the people like who are listening too. Like I haven't named any devs yet, but there's been tons of devs out there that I've talked to and they've been around for a long time, especially like the early OG Stellar like community devs. They have a lot of really good insight in like how do you foster that kind of conversation in a way where they feel like they're heard and where that can end up in the protocol. I'm not the person who can do that. I can listen, I can write down ideas, but like I think, where people have stepped in to provide that has been really beneficial to see. And I'm really glad that we finally have some sort of good cadence there because I think it's really important from a dev community perspective. So
yeah, agree. All right, so we've talked about community for close to 30 minutes now. It's been a while. We could probably go all day, but let's move towards kind of what you're working on now. Like you've kind of transitioned out of the forward-facing role, and now you're doing more marketing stuff. But like, what does that mean practically? Like, what is kind of some of the stuff you are focused on?
Yeah, so for SDF as an organization, like there's all kinds of different things that we're focused on from like a marketing perspective, but I think we kind of have to break down like what does marketing
Yeah.
mean? And so there's public appearance kind of marketing, like PR, like hey, this is somebody speaking at something or somebody being engaged from SDF on a larger platform. Then you have consumer marketing, so that's more along the lines of things like an application. So if we wanted to plug something like Vibrant or we wanted to plug something like either StellarZac or anything, who are we targeting for that specific thing? And then from a business perspective, like what companies, organizations could benefit by utilizing Stellar? And there's a lot of information that was needed that we had, but like we needed to sort through over years of like data. And so the first like we basically went from a very small marketing team to actually having a full marketing team now.
I would say almost like no marketing team. Like there wasn't really a marketing team. Like when I think back to like when I got brought on. Like,
yeah, I mean, you saw. I think everybody can say like they saw towards the end of 2019 after Meridian. We had a bunch of announcements for marketing hires. Yeah. Jordan joined us as CMO. Lauren joined us as PR and comms head, and and then that team's grown even more since then. And the first things were go through the data we have, aggregate it, make sure we understand what has been said and how to appeal to businesses or companies or individuals that want to build on Stellar. What kind of resources we need from a content perspective on like enhancing some of that stuff, which has been a big push from about the beginning middle of this year has been like getting that content stuff together. And then also like outbound marketing. So I think there's multiple kinds of marketing. I don't want to give a whole marketing course here, but essentially you have push and pull, and there's like simple stuff like social media, like a tweet on social media. That's marketing, though it's relatively easy stuff.
Yeah, it's a low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, it's low-hanging fruit stuff, but our community follows stuff like our Twitter, our subreddit, whatever. So they see all that stuff, and so I know a lot of people feel like, okay, we're not getting like updates, or we're not seeing these big giant press appearances, but you are getting like you're honed in, right? You know where to go if you need updates or you need like information. The thing is, other people out there, like businesses or individuals outside of the Stellar community, don't know where to go because they probably haven't heard of Stellar. So or if they have, it's only in passing or in research. And so the big focus for us has been, okay, what kind of media can we do? Placements. So this is like ads, whether that's like search ads or like print or whatever. Like where would the best place to do placements be that we can get people that are either interested in building on blockchain, have started to explore that, or have some sort of application they're utilizing already with a traditional like financial infrastructure where they could save money or costs or add additional features into whatever they're building by utilizing Stellar. And so these are the kind of targets we're looking at. As the marketing team has grown, so has the partnerships BD team, and they have brought a lot of insight as well, because they're the ones talking to the companies that come in through these sources, and they're also the ones doing the cold outreach to other companies. And so it's trying to marry the messaging that they're using to collect more people to talk about Stellar. So basically, beginning of the year was the research aggregate data stuff. Then we started pushing out some paid media. A lot more press appearances this year. I think Lauren's been doing a great job just talking to publications and talking to events. And I think if you compare SDF's presence at stuff last year, even compared to this year, I think it's like 3-4 times more things that Danelle and Jed have been able to like participate in. And that's awesome. A lot of those audiences and platforms are people that would otherwise have heard of Stellar. So the press stuff has been helpful and great. The ads are bringing in new companies that I think are good. And as the rest of the year goes on, we now have content teams. So we'll be pushing more like organic content stuff out there, stuff that are prospects. Like I say prospects because we're not actually selling. We're not selling. There's not a conversion for a sale. We're just trying to get people interested enough to talk about utilizing Stellar and how they can implement it. But that kind of content, like like the webinars that have been going on, that's been super helpful, and that's brought in a ton of people as well. But like, what's the next step for people who came to the webinar? Well, maybe they need like more guides. Maybe they need like some one-sheeters, or there's all kinds of assets that they can use to take back to the people that they're talking to. The same kind of approach that you would use when you're doing the ecosystem building with developers is very similar in marketing stuff. Like, you get them there, but then how do you keep them interested in, like, what do they do next? And so not a lot of our targets aren't going to be people who hop onto the subreddit and start talking like the ecosystem people, but like they will have a conversation internally.
Cool. How big is the marketing team now? Because we started
Yeah, we've
nobody,
got
and then right about the same time I got hired, it was Jordan.
Yeah, we got six people now, and each one's doing something very specific and very helpful. So I have really loved being a part of the team as it's grown, and seeing this stuff to come together has been really exciting. And I think, generally the effects will be felt generally the effects of marketing are felt like quarters out, just like over time. Lag. Yeah, just because you got to plant the seeds, and then those grow into other things later on. So I think I'm excited to see how the rest of this year ends up.
Yeah, I think people like underestimate how you're kind of talking about data earlier. They underestimate the sheer amount of data that had to be combed through to kind of guide decisions. But there's also this like onboarding process, right? Like when you hire people into the company, not only do you have to, onboard them to SDF, but you have to kind of onboard them into the sort of blockchain ecosystem as a whole, and like try to help them understand like who
the mindset targets behind. I mean, that's a really unique challenge to this industry versus like software as a service, or like just even like a fence repair place, right? Like blockchain has so much mystery around it that people we're starting to see a shift generally around the industry, like obviously banks and stuff looking into this kind of thing, like, but 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, there was still no, like, this is too risky, what are people going to think, like. And education, like, even though I've talked about education as being a primary factor for community, or education being the primary factor for the developers, it's also a primary factor for, people everywhere, companies that could use Stellar to build. So,
yeah, the barrier to entry is pretty high, and like being able to explain that to somebody while they're trying to do their job at the best that they can do it has been like a really interesting challenge as SDF has scaled. And there's just a lot of people who literally don't have the time to like study everything that's going on in the space. Like, they're not kind of like us, they're not super focused on like everything that's going on, and because they have lives outside of this. I mean, we're trying to get lives outside of this, everybody, trust me. But anyways, so it's a really hard thing, and that's something we've been focused on a lot too. It's like, how can we make sure people can get onboarded as quickly as possible and hit the ground running, rather than like this big lag between them getting hired and them being like fully ready to go, focus on whatever they need to do. And then whenever you tie marketing into that, you have to figure out like, okay, what audiences should we target? How should we target them? How can we bring them in? What's the best way to guide them? Like, there's just this whole list of hurdles you have to get through. So it's been cool to see, like, I guess the marketing team kind of figure that out over time. And there's been a lot of collaboration with our team and your team and stuff, trying to figure out what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, just to give a specific example with like the SCF relaunch, like one of the big parts of this SCF is going to be trying to get people in that are otherwise not part of Stellar community. And I think that's really going to be important, because through those efforts, like whether it's like just general dev communities, or if it's like people associated with other projects, you bring new ideas to the network, new use cases, and new like things that aren't considered. And I think that a lot of really cool stuff can happen when that happens. So we were focusing on doing a little bit of outreach as far as SCF goes. And by a little bit, I mean a consistent SCF outreach over the next, 3 to 6 months is pretty high priority, because that pays off long term. I mean, like I just said, like the people that you'll bring in and that build and that become part of the community, and they work places, and if their projects takes off, that's awesome, that's amazing. If they get embedded in the community, that's awesome. But even if you just learn how to use it, if they end up at someplace, down the road that is looking for like a payment rail solution or, something like that, they know how to use Stellar, and that goes a long way. So.
Yeah, that was one of the things I think was the most exciting to me when we were back pre-COVID doing in-person university hackathons, is there's just all of these students that are now familiar with Stellar that are like right on the cusp of getting hired somewhere. And being able to plant that seed is critically important and a really unique opportunity. So maybe one day we'll be able to get back to.
I mean, there's multiple verticals we're looking at and we want to talk to, and each one will respond to messaging differently. And that's been, that's been a big part of it. And, we want people to use Stellar who can benefit from using Stellar. And it's not just the indies. It's some of these big corporations out there too could benefit from it. And, and it can work with, in the existing products they're already using. It's just a matter of like finding the fit. So, or having them hear about it.
This might be a weird question, but do you think that like starting off in community and then switching to focusing solely on marketing has like guided decisions you would make? Has it like affected your mindset, like the way you approach certain audiences or like the way you understand certain audiences?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. From even way long back before I even was at SDF, I think it's really important to be involved with the community you're doing marketing work with.
Yeah.
Like it's the people who are using your product first or are always going to have like really valuable insight to take away. And whether it's positive comments that you can utilize in marketing messaging or negative ones where you can try to find like, how can we bring a solution to this later on or put it on a roadmap? Like it's really important to be embedded. I think I still haven't fully separated from the SDF or from the Stellar community. Like, so it's still very much with me every day. Even though I'm not as visible as I used to be, doesn't mean that I'm not considering like what is happening in the Stellar community day to day. And like I'm still there. And that stuff goes back into our conversations with the marketing team or as an organization, just the same way as the conversations you guys have with the ecosystem go back into those conversations and planning. So I think that being part of the community and being very close to the community definitely makes it a little personal sometimes, right? Like when like I'm like, well, the community is really asking for, something awesome, like a giant press parade or something like that. Like
billboard.
How can we make this work into our strategy? But at the same point, like remaining realistic, like, we actually do have a strategy and plan for how we roll this stuff out. And long term, I think that comes to be beneficial. So just a little mix of everything there.
For sure.
It's raining out here.
Yeah, no, it just started. So me and Zach live in the same area. And yeah, it just started,
wait,
like
I don't see
pouring
rain.
down. Yeah, it just started pouring down rain brutally. So, anyways, totally irrelevant to the conversation we're having. Let's talk about the weather,
folks. It's raining at this time right now.
I think not to get too off topic, but right now, you may have seen on Tuesday we rolled out the Meridian registration stuff, and obviously there's going to be more stuff coming as far as speakers and sessions over time. We were talking to a ton of different people, a ton of different organizations, and people to like, to share who those are going to be. But one thing I think we'd like to see from the community and the ecosystem in general, whether you're building on Stellar or you're just like an enthusiast of the network or you're out there being a cheerleader, is we'd love to get some ideas from you of what kind of sessions you would like to hear or speakers you would like to see. While, I expect it will be a pretty large list and be very diverse as far as like the kinds of people. We'd still love to see them. And I think what we'd like to do is once we've like gotten this list of stuff, kind of go through it and find ones that are common, like submissions, and then give it to the community and ecosystem an opportunity to kind of vote down on what sessions they'd like to see out of that list. So I actually have a link for that. If you guys want to, if I can drop it in the chat for you.
Go ahead, plug your link. I was going to add to that, like speaking of Meridian.
I can't add it to the chat because it's a link, and mod is going to have to prove it, I think.
Okay, can you send it to me?
Yes.
Send it to me on Slack. Don't send it right there because OBS might break. Our stream might break. What I was going to add, though, speaking of Meridian, is there will be a hackathon too at Meridian, which we didn't really do last year. So this is something that's going to be new. The full details of it are still being fleshed out. So speaking of ideas, if you're listening to this and you have ideas for a hackathon, or you have ideas for stuff that you think will be pretty cool, we would like to hear those as well, because it's something we're still very much planning. And also, speaking of Meridian, I'm really sad that it's not in person this year. I think last year's Meridian was like a really cool experience.
I think on that point, yeah, there's nothing that's going to ever compare to being in person at an event. But I think one of the things we've learned, and we have the opportunity this year since Meridian's towards the end of the year, of learning from everyone else who have moved to virtual events, like where can we bring back some of that, like that networking aspect in a way that doesn't feel as robotic, as mechanical. So I think we're looking at doing, not necessarily all going to be Stellar related, but a lot of really fun kind of immersive stuff outside of the general topics. So the way it's looking as it goes is you'll have all the cool sessions and speakers, the same kind of stuff that you would have seen in the real event, but also like peripheral to that, all kinds of networking events or things like hackathons and workshops and places for people to participate. So, fingers crossed for next year. I think we're going to bring it back to being live, but we've had a lot of opportunity to think about what can make it more engaging this year versus just sitting with a window open over on the side monitor for a 3-day session.
Yeah, I'm really glad it wasn't planned for like 5 months ago, and then it just like COVID and stuff like threw a wrench in the plans. That would have been just really bad. But also, I think one of the cool things about Meridian is the fact that it's not all Stellar related. Like last year was really cool because you had people just talking about all kinds of different things. So it's like, yeah, I think not being 100% focused on Stellar is like Meridian's big value proposition, and it brings in a lot of people that you probably wouldn't have met otherwise,
Yeah, there's a question here about Ethereum able to invest a lot in their platform, and I think that's a really interesting question that I'd actually like to tackle real quick. The only question I've seen pop up so far, but I think if you look at our mandate, it's outlined how the funds will go, and SDF as an organization has pretty decent ability to use those funds where they can help grow projects organically or help like in situations where you see destock grow. But there's also a lot to be said about these organizations that start building on Stellar that can do some of that stuff themselves. Like there's plenty of opportunity across the board for Stellar to grow without just being influenced by SDF's participation. And a big part of what we're doing in marketing and the dollars that are allocated there as far as the mandate goes is making sure we use that to the best ability to grow that general ecosystem, so we have more services available for people who want to grow and create an ecosystem that is sustainable without SDF being here, which is
I think there's no question that like we've spent a lot of time, especially over the past several months, like focusing on how we can invest back into the ecosystem, whether it's through the enterprise like use case investments or our grants program or the SCF or hackathons or whatever other things we have planned. But also like we've started to see projects like invest back into the ecosystem. When you talk about Lightmint taking over Stellarport, or you see Lobster like branching out their offerings. So like we've seen a bunch of stuff in that area, and it's been really cool to see because people are just doubling down on their efforts within the ecosystem. So it's starting to get multi-layered, and like you're saying, we really have people outside of SDF focusing on advancing the many different things that exist within the ecosystem and putting their expertise to the test and like putting their money where their mouth is. So
yeah, and I mean internally, people are hustling too. Like it's not one team's effort here. Like the organization as a whole, it really comprises like where things are going, and everyone is boots on the ground, like hustling daily. So it just takes time. Takes time, but it'll be there, and it is there.
It's getting there. Tyler, anything you want to add?
No, this has been a lot of fun. Really excited that we've finally got the one and only StellarZac on our show. This has been fantastic. Looking forward to all the amazing efforts and work that's going to come out of the marketing team in the future.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed being here. There's so many people I want to thank. I want to call out from the community, but I don't want to single every single person out in case I miss someone. But just know that all of you out there have been amazing, and I really appreciated all of our conversations we had, and I hope we continue to have them because they are really awesome and important to not only the growth of the community, but the growth of the network. So it's been a pleasure being here today with all of you.
All right, now it's time to plug. So if you want to keep up with the latest updates, twitter.com/stellarorg is the Twitter. rstellar is the Reddit. Stellar.org is the website. Podcast.stellar.org is the podcast website. If you're not subscribed to the podcast YouTube channel or the main SDF channel, subscribe to both of those. Well, first off, the main SDF channel has had a lot of content over the past 2 quarters. So if you want stellar content all the time, subscribe there. Sam asked, is the hat for sale? Yeah, it's for sale right on Zach's website. He has a promo code.
No. To seriously answer that question, Meridian, stay tuned for Meridian. There'll be some cool swag for people, some people who are attending. So just keep an eye out. Maybe the hat's a secret Meridian plug.
Yeah, it could be. Wow, how are you so good at that? Oh my God. But anyway, if you're not subscribed to this channel, please subscribe. I think we're still on the once a month schedule for these live things. Me and Tyler will try to have a guest on, but it's really hard to convince people to hang out with us these days. So we'll see what's in store for next month. Any last things to plug before we shut it down?
Drop that link in the show notes for the Meridian ecosystem survey. We'd love to hear from you guys in the community, whether you're a developer or a community member or a champion or whatever, sessions that would be of particular interest to you. Stellar sessions are great. Stellar ecosystem, Stellar projects that you would love to hear, if you'd like to hear from any of them, but also outside of just Stellar directly, feel free to throw anybody on there. We will put them together and give an opportunity for the community to kind of take a look at top submissions and choose a few.
All right.
Via quadratic voting. Wait, what?
Well, maybe a little easier than that, but
okay.
All right. Awesome. Thanks everybody
All
for
right,
tuning in.
Fantastic. Thanks everyone for joining.
Bye.
Ciao.